Welcome to the Docketing Excellence webinar series, which is sponsored by Black Hills IP and the SLW Institute. Black Hills IP is an accurate, efficient, and cost-effective U.S.-based IP docketing and paralegal service provider that focuses on using technology and automation to provide the highest quality level of services available today. The SLW Institute is an educational group created by the Schwegman Lundberg Wissner firm, which aims to provide insightful and useful information to the IP community. For this webinar series, we have pulled together docketing experts and managers from the Schwegman firm, Black Hills IP, and their respective clients and customers to help educate on key docketing challenges and issues and share best practices on how to overcome them. The Docketing Excellence webinar series is free. To listen to our past webinars or to register for future webinars, go to the tab for our educational resources on the Black Hills IP website, which is www.blackhillsip.com. The webinar that we are presenting today is the sixth one in our Trademark Docketing series. Today's topic is tips for managing the manual entry of transferred trademark data with a trademark portfolio. We have allowed time for questions at the end of the webinar. Questions can be submitted at any time, however, using the question box in the control panel, which is probably on the right-hand side of your browser window. You can submit a question at any time during the presentation. The question will be held in a queue until the end of the presentation, though. The presenters today are myself and Shakalatsky Carrion. I am Ann McCracken, the president of Black Hills IP. I'm a patent attorney with 21 years experience in patent prosecution. I was a partner at the Schwegman firm for 10 years, and was also a full-time law professor and directed the patent prosecution program at Franklin Pierce Law Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Zee, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Shakalatsky Carrion. Some of you know me as Z. I'm the docketing manager at SLW. I've been at SLW since 2005. Soon after I had graduated from law school and I did my bar exam in Mexico. I've been in the docketing department for 8 years and managing this department for 5 years. In my department, many transfer-ins have been handled, and just last year we handled about a little bit over 10,000 transferred-in files. We opened for patents and trademark matters.
Wow, Zee, that's a lot of transferred-in files, and thank you for joining us for another webinar. We appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about, first, what is a file transfer to orient ourselves with terminology, then what data goes into your docketing system when you're dealing with a trademark file transfer, and finally, tips and tricks for where to get that data when you're setting up the records in your system. So to begin with, when we talk about what a file transfer means, we're talking about a group of files that are not already in your docketing system. These may be matters that were filed by somebody else. Most likely they were filed by a previous law firm or a previous company. And it's a batch of matters then that are being moved over or transferred into your firm or your company and need to get set up into the docketing system that you use. These individual records may or may not have something to docket. That's part of what you have to figure out as you're going through the process of setting them up in the docketing system. And you also need to figure out what stage the matter is. Is it pending? Is it registered? Personally, I think that the transfer-in process is one of the most complex processes that a docketer or docketing team has to do, because when you're dealing with just the day-to-day docketing of correspondence, you know something comes to you because there was a reason. It was something that was filed or something that was received and needs to be updated on the docket. But when you're going through a group of transferred files, it's not always organized clearly. You don't know what the status is. You don't know if there is even anything in there that needs to be docketed. So it really is a complex process, and that's why we're going to focus today on how you handle manually entering that data into your docketing system. So just another word on terminology. We use the term file transfers. You might also think about this as acquisitions. So in the corporate environment, if you're acquiring a portfolio and you're bringing that into your docketing system internally, the concepts we're talking about here apply equally to files being transferred to a law firm or files being acquired by a corporation. So with that said, did I skip a slide here?
Nope.
No, I don't think so.
No.
So with that said, Z, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what information you request in the context of transfer between law firms. What do you request from your previous counsel or client when you're dealing with a file transfer?
Well, it's very important to request instructions regarding when is the date that you're actually responsible for this transfer. It could be the 1st of October and you have time to start opening these matters. You don't have to start opening them on October 1st, but you have like a little heads up of starting to put these in your system, and your company won't be responsible for these until this date that the client is giving you. The other thing is I would request a docket of all upcoming due dates. For trademarks, usually for patents, I'll ask for 1 year, but for trademarks, a 20-year docket isn't that off. Like a lot of law firms can provide that because those renewal deadlines are so far in advance. Request a list of the files that are being transferred. This is very important. So you, one, know which matters you need to open into your system. Two, what are you really responsible for? And then here in 2-3 years, maybe it could be in 5 years, someone's asking about a file that was sent to you, and you can say, actually, this is what we're responsible for in the matter that you're contacting me for. The trademark that you're referring to is not in this list. But anyways, having a list is always really nice because then you know what you actually are responsible for. What does this list need to have? Title, the serial number, filing date, register, what type of mark type it is, class code, publication date, registration number and date. The status is very important too, and then you'll find out why the status is important too in a few slides. And who your foreign associate is. That way you have someone to contact in case you're not receiving information from the previous counsel or the client. There's another resource that you could use of like, hey, what's the status of this trademark application? And I kind of like to receive all of these reports in Excel spreadsheet, especially the list of the matters that are being transferred, because it's just easier to, you can add in that spreadsheet the matters that you have opened in your system. It's just a little easier to handle. But like I said, I do have quite some experience with transferred ins. Just last year, we opened 10,000 transfers. And in this, when we're talking about transferred ins, I want you to keep in mind that it's teamwork between you, the client, the previous counsel, and the attorney that you're working with. Ask for much information that you can receive. As a tip, I would always suggest to have a draft of a wish list prepared and make sure that it's given to the previous counsel or the client as soon as you find out that a transfer in is coming your way. It's a little wish list. It doesn't mean that you're going to get everything that you're asking for, but ask big to get little.
So when you're asking for that information, requesting it, logistically, how do you provide the wish list? How do you make that request for information? Is it a letter? How do you do that?
It's a letter that's already it had been prepared by an attorney, and it's very general, saying, "Hey, now we're responsible for these matters." The attorney can list what the family is called, and in one of those paragraphs is we need a docket report with due dates 20 years out, and then please provide a list. And the list actually is all of these that I just shared with you, the title, the serial number, filing date, and so on. So we just try to capture, can you please send this to us? And also, you're kind of giving a heads up to the previous council how many days they have for them to end all of the deadlines that they're dealing with. So you have 30, 60, or 90 days to complete any deadlines that are around here so you can send it to us.
So when an attorney comes to you and they have a new client and they want to get the information in the docket as quickly as they can, you've got basically a template letter that you can hand them and have them send out to previous counsel or their client, whichever one, to get the information. And I assume that makes it a lot easier for the attorney, and it also makes it easier for your team because it helps to hopefully get the information that your team needs, right?
Yes, definitely.
I think that's a great...
I think it moves stuff a little quicker.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. So then once you get the information, how do you organize it to start putting it in the docketing system?
So what I recommend to do immediately when you start a transfer is to read all of the emails and the documents that you have received, because I've seen that there's been conflicting instructions in the emails, like from the first email that you got to the last one. In the middle, you'll find something else like, oh, but wait, for this family, you're not responsible for it. And when you're just reading the top email, then you think that you're responsible for everything. So just always read every document, every spreadsheet that like kind of go through it, not word by word, but kind of go through it so you have an idea of what you're really responsible for. At that point, you need to ask the attorney or the client for clarification if you find any conflicting instructions. And then you review the docket and identify which are the matters that you need to open first. So I would say review the docket that you're working on and see which ones have the most urgent due dates. And based also on your client instructions, because sometimes in the email or the document that you receive, they'll like flag stuff that says, hey, there's this one that just issued and we want to file a continuation. So always keep in mind the client's instructions as well. And organize and review the files that you have received. Sometimes you're going to receive them physically or you will get them electronically. Either way, organization is key. You don't know if you're going to be opening them like by families, individual files. That's how you're going to, you reviewing the documents that you received is how you're going to start organizing yourself of how you're going to open these matters. Maybe you're going to leave abandoned and inactive files towards the end, and then you're just going to focus on things that have due dates and deadlines first. Then you go to pending and allowed, and then you're abandoned and inactive. And then I would just say periodically check your docket and add anything that it's upcoming with due dates. And I would notify your paralegal and your attorney if you're opening a matter and that matter has something due right away. Don't wait towards the end when you're going to be done with the transfer and you're going to send the docket report or let them know about the due dates. I would notify them right away, because sometimes when you send a big report that I'm done, it won't capture their attention right away. If you're just singling this matter out and say, hey, I opened it up and there's this thing that is due, they will pay attention ASAP.
Sure.
So never assume also that you are or you're not responsible for a trademark that seems to be part of a trademark that you're working on. I would always ask for a confirmation regarding that, because sometimes attorneys will be like, oh, yeah, please open it. You are responsible for the whole family. And when you have that process of thought, like, oh, I'm responsible for everything, then you encounter one matter that you were actually just responsible for that one trademark and not for everything else. So a little question before you open it doesn't hurt.
So it sounds like it can happen then that as you're organizing the matters, you find something in a family that wasn't on the list that you got from previous counsel, right?
That's correct.
And in that instance, then what do you do about that additional family member?
Yeah, I would just shoot an email to the attorney and then just be like, can you please confirm with the client or previous counsel? Really, it's more the client that needs to make this call and not previous counsel to say, are we responsible for this or not? I've just noticed that me assuming, or someone from my department assuming that we are responsible, has come in and we've had to delete the matter.
Okay.
So ask first.
Okay, so then once you've got it organized and you're getting ready to start putting the information in the docketing system, how much information beyond the basic bibliographic information that identifies the matter do you put in the system when you're opening up records for transferred matters?
So there isn't really like bad or wrong ways. There are always a variety of ways to do this. And the way that I do this and the method that has helped me the most is to just put it up the upcoming deadlines or the due dates. And then after that, move for the matters. If there isn't a due date or deadline, because not all matters will have something out there, docket a status check. So at least these matters don't fall off the radar of the paralegal that's going to be in charge of the matter. And I would say every file document, file histories that you receive electronically or physically, I would put it in the system. And at Schwegman, we have a specific activity where we put these file histories, and it's actually called File History as Received or downloaded from the trademark office. We will put the file histories in there just so everybody knows where to be able to find the information that we received or that we downloaded.
Okay. So I know you handle both trademark transfers and patent matter transfers. Is the process easier or harder to get the information that you need for trademark records versus patent records?
So just as an example, TSDR versus pair. For me, it's easier TSDR to obtain the file history. It's public information. So you are able to download the file history without having a power of attorney or without having to worry that the matter has been published. And for pair, the matter has to be published, and hopefully they didn't file a non-publication request, because then you're kind of screwed and you're depending on somebody to give you the file history. So for me, I will say that TSDR is a little easier to manage on the U.S. trademark side.
So the information is more accessible. You don't have to wait for a power of attorney, for example, to be filed to get access to the trademark information if you're referring to public databases to get some of that information, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I think it sounds like one of the things that's really critical for managing the process of file openings is to have a good process in place at the high level. And we're not talking at the moment about what you do to fill in individual fields of a record for an individual matter, but that higher level process or workflow around the transfer in task. Can you talk about what the process is that your team uses for transfer ins at that higher level?
So this is going to be kind of specific of the system that we work in, but I think we have kind of like generalized it. I think everybody in their system, they're going to identify their clients with different numbers or with a letter. So I would always say identify under what client number or letter you're going to be opening your matters. Once you identify that, you're going to see if you're going to open the matters by families, if you're going to open them by like related cases. And once you know, okay, I know that this belongs to client A, and I'm going to open it all under A, move on to see who your personnel is going to be, the attorney that you're going to work with, the paralegal. Seek for your client's instructions because they will be very specific of who the correspondence contact and copy contacts are. And once you get your docket, review the docket report that you have received and prioritize the data entry. How are you going to enter this information? Highlight the cases that have priority and that need to be open in your system first. I would do create a master list of due dates within the next month. I don't know. That's why Excel spreadsheet is so nice, because you're able to, okay, I'm going to focus on the ones that have due dates or deadlines coming up, and you can remove some rows or columns. It just helps you organize yourself better. And then do a second eye review of all of the deadlines that you have actually identified, so you know the order that you have to take of opening these matters. And I would notify any attorney or paralegals that are involved in these matters that you are going to be opening if there's any urgent deadlines that are approaching. Just like I mentioned in my previous slide, of don't wait towards the end to notify the paralegal or attorney that there's a deadline. Send them a quick email saying, I opened this matter, there's a notice of allowance that has been received, or any action that you got that needs a response. Let them know right away.
So all this is prep work to get things organized before you actually dive in and start creating the records in the system to make sure that that process goes smoothly, right?
Yeah, yes.
When you talked about building that master list of due dates that are coming up in the short term, logistically, what do you use? How do you save those? Where do you put them? What do you use for that?
So, again, spreadsheets. We try to use the Excel spreadsheets, and we do have a system in where we can save all of these Excel spreadsheets that we received, or PDF documents. I do have people from my team that if they list in the email or a Word document the files, they will add it themselves in an Excel spreadsheet, so they can add the Schwegman reference number. So we try to use a lot of Excel, and a place in common, to let us know where it has been saved, just in case they're on vacation or something like that. We all have access to that spreadsheet, and we could go see what's going on.
Okay. So then after you've got the transfer work organized, what next?
What next? So then we have to go for urgent files that you were going to share with us.
Okay. So the top priority when you're handling a transfer is those short turnaround deadlines, those urgent files. And ideally, when you built that master list during your triage process, you've identified those urgent files on that master list. So those are the ones that you're going to process first, get them in the system first. And depending on the size of the intake that you're doing, you might just do that one particular matter, or if you have time, maybe you do the whole family. That's an organizational decision that you probably made in the beginning. But the individual record with that urgent deadline needs to get into the docket. Ideally, then at that point, I would also suggest that you run a docket report out of your system to confirm that the dates that you have on your master list, which is probably your spreadsheet, are all showing up on that docket report, so that you've got all of those urgent deadlines that you identified into the docketing system. The last thing you want to happen is to have identified that there was an urgent deadline but not get it into the system onto somebody's docket. And that's the reason why there's a lot of checks in this process. One of those checks that Z talked about earlier was when you identify the urgent deadlines, tell the paralegal, tell the attorney right away so they're aware of it. Get it into the docketing system so it's on the docket, and then you also have it on this master list, which you're checking against that docket report from the docketing system to make sure all the dates got in the system. And then ideally, also do the second eye review on those urgent files on a daily basis, so that rather than putting all the things in the system and then circling back and doing a second eye review process, those critical deadlines or short turnaround deadlines are getting the second eye review on a daily basis, so you know that they're in there correctly. Once you have the urgent deadlines addressed, then you can go on to opening the rest of the matters that you have in your intake process. So we'll go into that process of opening individual records a little bit later in the program. At this point, let's assume all the records, the urgent and the non-urgent records, have been opened. And then at that point, what's next in the high-level process?
The good part, you finalize the transfer in. So what happens, you're going to do your final review of all of the documents that you have received, the emails. Sometimes you receive 2, 3 spreadsheets. And if you don't do that review of all of your spreadsheets and compare, sometimes you'll find like there was a 1 or 2 matters that were included in the second or the third spreadsheet. So always that complete review of every spreadsheet that you receive is key. And it's also important for you to share the love too with the attorney and the paralegals, because don't keep the information that you receive to yourself, but share it, because then there could be maybe the paralegal will go into the spreadsheet and will look into the matters and see, oh, this one's due. And sometimes they will communicate, hey, can you open this one first? If you never shared that information, then the paralegal will never contact you, because how is she gonna know? So then the other thing is a second eye review of all the cases. In our case at Schwegman, our second eye review is the paralegal, and pretty much. So the docketing personnel opens the matter, and then we let the paralegal know, hey, please review this matter, and if there's nothing, if you find something, please make sure that you update our system. This is pretty much a second set of eyes of someone that had already opened that matter. Sometimes you know how you review, and you're like, you don't miss it, and you're like, somebody else sees it, and is like, oh, you misspelled this. You're like, oh my God, I've been seeing this document like 2 or 3 times. So second set of eyes in that review is not bad at all. And then, like I had mentioned again, and I'm repeating it again, notify the attorney and the paralegal. But in this part, in the finalize, you're giving a report, a list of all of the matters that you opened, and you're going to put your docketing reference number, and then a docket report 1 year from when you started opening matters, so they have a docket to run from, or due dates that are actually in your system, not somebody else's system.
So you mentioned on the second eye review at the Schwegman firm, the docketing department opens the records and the paralegal will do the second eye review.
That's correct.
Could that be a docketer that does the second eye review?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it could be whoever else in your department or in your firm that you trust that knows how to do it, or they know what they're looking for. Yes, definitely.
So the key thing would be that it's a different person doing the review than the person that opened the record. And depending on the organization, you can determine if that should be somebody in your docketing department, if you have a bigger docketing department, if it would be the paralegal, maybe even the attorney, just as long as it's another set of eyes outside the set of eyes that were the ones that opened the record, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, now let's get into the individual record opening process. We've talked about the higher level process and workflow around transfer ends. Now, how do you go about setting up an individual trademark matter in the docketing system?
So here's another checklist, a little list that we kind of follow, and I'm sharing with you all. I would say first check for the matter in your docketing system. Check by application, registration number, the previous firm docket number. If it's already in your system, update the matter as needed and just move on to next, or update it accordingly. Second step would be audit the file and enter the data into your system. Review application status online so you can identify most of the updated information. Like if it's a U.S. matter, check TSDR. for a trademark. And if you received a physical file, make sure that you review what you received. And I would always scan and upload that file into your system, now more that we're being paperless. Set up a file in your system, paying particular attention to priority and any outstanding due dates, including the renewal deadlines. If the trademark is registered, enter your correct application number, the filing date, the mark type, status, class codes, priority, that bibliographic data that we have talked about. Add the file history to your matter. Like I had mentioned, we had a special activity where we enter this information so everybody knows where to find it in your firm. Upload the file history that you might have received physically or electronically. Also confirm the responsible parties that you're adding into your system, which could be your paralegal, the attorney, if they're billing, working, signing, and originating attorney. That could be a little bit too specific for Schwegman's system. Maybe you just have one attorney that's doing the whole shebang. And then also remember your client's instructions, who's going to be your correspondence contact and your copy contacts for that particular matter, or for that client that you're opening matters to. Always verify the client, the assignee, applicant, the owner of the trademark, foreign associate, if it's applicable, or even your prior counsel. I would always recommend for you to add like the reference numbers, because sometimes in some systems it'll be easier for you to find a matter. It comes very convenient when there's one attorney that goes from one firm to another and brings matters with them. They're kind of familiar with that reference number and not the Schwegman number or the firm that you're at. So if you use the old number that they're familiar with, then it comes very handy. Update any past due dates in your system, and that would be depending on your preference or your firm's policy. Any past due activities that you are unable to delete, mark them as cleared or closed. I know there's some people who will be like, I will never delete anything, and there's all about other people who are like, I'm all about deleting. It's about your preference. The thing is, clear your matters so you know what you actually need to pay attention to. Confirm related matters and priority applications have been added to your system. Sometimes this is it helps you put trademarks in the families that they belong to. Review rest of the file history documents, like I said, like the emails, the documents, spreadsheets that you have received. Anything that you can mention to the paralegal or the attorney, noted in the system. If there's like deadlines that are coming up, or you found an office action and you sent it, or you're going to docket it, or if you have another company that does your docketing, I would write like, so-and-so, I sent this office action to so-and-so on this date, and then just check back in a day or two to see if it has been docketed in your system. Add docket dates and notes in your system and inform the paralegal and attorney, like I had actually previously said. In a transfer, communication is it's key, and teamwork as well. And after that, you're going to check your file off the transfer list that you had received, and add the reference number that you created, or how you're going to identify that matter that you open, and voila, you have opened a matter in your system, and you just need to move on to the next matter and repeat.
This is a great list. Thank you very much for sharing that. I assume the same person does all the steps on this list typically, right? And how long would you say that it takes to open an individual record when you're going through a process like this?
So when the stars align to your favor, I would say like 15 minutes. Really, when you have all of the information that you need, let's just say you have access to everything and you have the file history, it should be like less than 15 minutes. The problem comes when you don't receive all of the information, when there's that one day that your system is slow, It's an actual big file that you need to download. And, there's so many variety of things that can slow you down. Sometimes the information that we receive, we don't get it correctly. There's a typo in the registration number that we got, or the application number doesn't match, so it, when all good, less than 15 minutes.
Okay.
And sometimes you do need to seek information and put your Sherlock Holmes hat on, and potentially that can take a lot longer.
So a month ago, we did a webinar where we talked about adding matters to a system manually versus doing an electronic data import. And if anybody missed that one, you can go and listen to that one on our website. But if you're trying to do a time consideration to figure out, time constraints and how much time it was going to take if you did it manually, if you just took the number of matters you had to open times 15 minutes, that'd give you a good ballpark for what the time required would be to do all the matter openings manually then, right?
Yeah, yes, it can take a long time.
And then what really takes time, though, is those ones where you have to go and search for information, like you said. And that brings us to the next series of slides, which talk about what do you do if the data that you get from the client or from the previous counsel is incomplete or inaccurate? How do you fill that information in? Well, one great source of information is the public trademark office websites in countries around the world. So, for example, for a U.S. trademark matter, you can use the TSDR information, and we've got the URL for that. And later in the presentation, we've included a list of links for a number of other countries' trademark offices where you can also go to get information, so we'll get to that later. But that's one good source to use to verify the information or fill in incomplete information. There are other good general public websites on trademarks and with trademark databases. SAGES is one of them. CSC is another. We have both of those links in the materials as well. And then finally, don't forget, you can always contact the client for information, or the foreign associate is another good source if you need to get copies of file histories or documents that you're missing. And then when you're contacting the foreign associates, I know, Z, you mentioned to me that your docketing department also sometimes at that time handles the change of counsel letter too, right? So
Yeah.
How does that work in your process?
So we once we know who the foreign associate is, we send an email to the foreign associate, this letter, again, the draft letter that we have. It's a template. And we ask them, hey, so now Schwegman's responsible for these matters. Please communicate any information that you might have of this matter. The client has approved this. Here's our address if you want to send anything to us via mail. And please contact, if you have any communications, please send it to this email address, which is our docketing department address. And then here's your attorney, and here's the paralegals that you need to contact for this specific matter. And then towards the end, we're like, by the way, even though you have already communicated something to the previous U.S. Law firm, can you please let us know what the status is about this matter? And at that point, what you're seeking is that if there's any office actions that are out there or anything that is due, that they're going to tell you, and they're going to give you a status of what the matter of that trademark is. So there's another source to find information. Now, just as a little tip is never trust the spreadsheets that you receive from a client or a previous counsel, because we're human and we make mistakes, and sometimes those spreadsheets are made by someone. And so I would say that also when you're reviewing these spreadsheets, to use your common sense, because if you're talking about a trademark of a shoe, and then you look into the trademark website and they're talking about a television, then it doesn't really make sense. So So I use your common sense on that stuff when you're reviewing your spreadsheets or um, whenever you get the information from a previous counsel or a client.
Good. Well, so from a workflow or a process standpoint, then some people might think that the change of counsel letter should be done by a paralegal or an admin, and it can be done by anybody in the process. But you found that it's particularly helpful to have the docketing department do it because you can start ensuring that the new future docketing correspondence is coming to the right place, and you can get additional information that you may need for the records that you're currently opening. So from a workflow standpoint, you found that that actually makes a lot of sense to have the docketing team do that, even though some people might not necessarily have thought that was a docketing task, right?
Yeah. And we also have sometimes when the paralegals will be, you know what, I'm going to send the email because they want to bunch up all of their matters in one, and then we let it be. So it's interesting that you said there could be other people that do it, and it does happen in our department too, where the paralegal will be like, don't worry, I will handle the change of counsel letter.
Okay. All right, now let's talk about the example of a U.S. trademark record that's being set up in a docketing system, and more specifically, we'll just use Foundation IP as an example because I know that's what you work in. Can you walk us through the setup process? And basically what we have here that you've provided is a series of slides that are screenshots from a sample record out of TSDR. And you're going to walk through them as though you were a docketer looking for information to populate into fields into the record in Foundation IP, and show us how and where you would get the details out of TSDR to use to set up a record in the docketing system, correct?
Correct. So what you're seeing is a cheat sheet created by someone in my department that has become very useful when in doubt, what are you missing to add in your docketing system? So what you're going to see in red are the names of the fields that we need to enter into our docketing system. In your docketing system, it might be called a little different, but this is just an example that I will be sharing with you all. So as you see here, we see Mark, and where it says Mark in TSDR, that's what we use for the title. The stuff in red is all the information that we will be adding in our system. So the U.S. serial number in our system, it's called application number, registration number. Where do I need to look for the mark type, the publication date, the notice of allowance? If you see all of this is like bibliographic, very general information of this SAM's mark that we're trying to open into our system. So the next slide is just below of the mark information, and it's the goods and services, and this is where you see what kind of class code you're working with and the description of that class code, when it was first used and when the first use date in commerce. Now, the letters in green here, it's just kind of a little explanation of how we handle the dates for the first use and the use in commerce. This is, I don't know if it's the right way or not, but this is how we handle it at Schwegman. That if they just mention the year, let's say in this case, they would just say 2010, we would add January 1, 2010. If they would have said May 2010 for the first use, we would have done May 1st, 2010. Again, this is just a way that we do it at Schwegman. I don't know if it's the right way or not. And then there's the basis information where you find if it's the file has been in use or it's intended to use, or if the mark is currently in use, or the mark is intended to be used. Below that, this is another thing that a trademark, just a simple U.S. matter, can take from 15 minutes to 30 minutes to get open, and it's the who the current owner of the trademark is. If you see here, okay, so sorry, not in this one. It's the next slide. You're good right now. In this slide, it'll tell you who the current owner is, so you could put the applicant and who the attorney is, or the previous counsel. If you file a power of attorney or revocation of power of attorney, where it says attorney and correspondence information, your law firm's information will be included in there. Now, this next slide, which I was getting myself ahead, it was this part. If you see, it says assignment 1 of 4. That means that there was 4 assignments for this trademark. And for us, we enter the information for each of these assignments into our system. Sometimes there could be more than 4 assignments, so it's not hard to do, but it is time consuming. And when you have a whole bunch of assignments to enter into your system, then it's going to take you a lot more than 15 minutes to open in a matter. So with this, I have shared a little cheat sheet of how we use TSDR, the information that's in there, and how to populate it into our docketing system.
Well, that's a great example, Z, and the fields may be labeled slightly differently in other docketing systems, but I'm assuming that most docketing systems are using similar information to what you've identified here through this example TSDR record, and that anybody opening trademark matters for U.S. cases and other systems will be able to map this to the fields in their system accordingly. So, it also goes back to the comment that you've made earlier in what we talked about, which is how much information do you put in the system? Maybe you don't care about having the full chain of title in the system, and then you don't have to spend that extra time. Or maybe it's important that you do have of that. So practices may vary from organization to organization with respect to how much of this information you've identified goes into the record as well. But we just wanted to walk through it to show you where you can get that information. Now, the next thing that I have is a list of foreign trademark office websites that we've found to be particularly helpful when you're trying to fill in the gaps for missing data or verify the data that previous counsel provided to you. So you will get a copy of these slides. I don't expect anybody to write down these URLs, but we've got a pretty complete list here. Argentina, this is ASEAN is an Asian countries, a group of member states. Australia, Austria, Belarus, Brazil, Benelux, Canada, Chile, China, Croatia, Colombia, Denmark, Spain, France, Great Britain, Hong Kong, Hungary, Ireland, India, Iceland, Italy, Japan, Korea, Latin America, Malaysia, Norway, New Zealand, Puerto Rico, Singapore, Turkey, Taiwan, WIPO's Madrid cases, WIPO's Global Brand Database, Vietnam. So that's a good starter list for sure. That's a pretty extensive list, and those websites all have good information that you can use when you need to reference them for creating trademark records in your system. So at this point, we're going to take a minute to see if anybody has any questions. And I just want to remind people that you can submit questions using the question box in the control panel on your screen. If you have questions specifically about Black Hills IP services or processes, please contact Jim Brophy. He has contact information on this particular slide. And also, just wanted to let everybody know that we will post these slides and an audio recording of today's program on our website, which again was blackhillsip.com, and you can find these slides under the tab for our educational resources. At this point, I don't see any questions, so I want to announce the next program in our trademark docketing series. It's on October 3rd, and it will be focused on what to expect when docketing TTAB oppositions and cancellation proceedings. So to register for that webinar, please go to the tab on our Educational Resources website, and you can register for that program. So thank you for participating today. We'll hope you'll join us for this and other webinars in our Docketing Excellence webinar series. Thank you.